Hype, prodigy, once in a generation. If these words make you think Luka Doncic, well, you're not alone. Few players in the history of the sport have a bigger buzz surrounding their entry to the NBA. At just 21, Doncic has already accrued a truly insane stat sheet. All-Star, All-NBA First Team, Rookie of the Year, All-Rookie First Team, and not to mention a whole array of awards and honors from his prior glory playing in the EuroLeague. In just over 2 seasons with the Dallas Mavericks, Luka is also terrifyingly close to averaging a 25-point triple-double. With numbers like these, a budding reputation for fourth-quarter heroics, and all at a young age when most players are still in college, more and more people have been making the comparison to the king himself. Luka Doncic is destined for greatness, and he hasn't shown many signs of slowing down yet. So why aren't we hearing about him more than we are? It seems like a player of this magnitude with this bright a future would be absolutely dominating the headlines. It's not like Luka has disappeared, and he certainly hasn't been forgotten about. But for the past several months, the basketball world seems to be primarily focused on other sagas. The brilliant young star from Slovenia and his promising Mavericks seem more like a sideshow, a subplot, a peripheral anecdote. Pundits are focused on the Lakers defending their title, the Clippers' continuing disappointments, Steph Curry's attempts to survive as a solo star, and of course, the new dramatic duo in Brooklyn. It's not that these aren't interesting or important things to pay attention to, but why are they drowning out what is arguably the single most exciting story in the NBA? Well, it turns out there are a few reasons. Terrible shooting. So far in the 2020-2021 season, Luka has had historically bad shooting. In fact, his three-point shooting has been so atrocious that he is currently second place for the worst three-point percentage in the entire NBA. This has critics baffled. The only player worse than Doncic is the Warriors' new forward, Kelly Oubre. So far this season, Oubre has attempted 21 three-pointers and, astonishingly, only made one of them. As luck would have it, Luka Doncic has also shot 21 three-pointers so far this season, but he's managed to make 2. For the past 2 seasons, Doncic's three-point percentage has been well over 30%. Why, suddenly, it is now less than 10% is anybody's guess. But one thing is certain, it's reducing the number of highlights Luka creates night after night. One of Doncic's signature moves is his step-back three-pointer, which is virtually impossible to defend if he actually makes them consistently. His personality. So far, Doncic has managed to remain largely out of controversy on social media, despite having millions of followers on both Twitter and Instagram. This might have something to do with him simply having a more reserved personality than some other NBA stars, while other players such as Kyrie Irving and Russell Westbrook have a history of courting controversy with their remarks about the media and other issues. Doncic has remained relatively silent. When it comes to matters from the basketball court, it seems like Luka is more interested in keeping his head down and staying focused. That certainly isn't a bad thing. Different players have different personalities, and the way they choose to deal with the public scrutiny of being a global sports figure is of course up to them. Luka Doncic seems like he might simply be a man of few words. For instance, when asked about his decision to play in the NBA bubble last season rather than opt out like some of his teammates, Doncic replied, "I never hesitated. I missed basketball a lot, so I just wanted to play." He was similarly terse when speaking about a quote from his trainer who seemed to be criticizing Luka's conditioning. Luka clarified his trainer's remarks, saying, "He said like game shape. That means like 5-on-5. I saw it, but honestly, I just don't care much because I know what shape I'm in. I think I'm in good shape." However, this brings up another reason why you aren't hearing much about Luka Doncic today. His physical condition. Luka's physical condition has been a subject of scrutiny pretty much from the moment he set foot on an NBA court. It goes without saying that professional basketball is an extremely taxing physical sport that requires players to be in top physical condition year-round. Many have speculated whether Doncic is at top physical condition. The owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban, said that at the start of the 2020-2021 season, Doncic wasn't in, quote, as good of a shape as he wanted, end quote. Doncic himself has said as recently as December of 2020 that, quote, "I'm not in my best shape. I will get there for sure," end quote. He went on to add, "I've never been a muscular guy, so what can I say?" The 2020 offseason was the shortest offseason in professional sports history. Luka Doncic is still considered an MVP contender this year. And in all likelihood, he's been hitting the gym regularly to improve his conditioning. This has kept him largely out of the limelight for the time being. while Luka works to better his game and prepare for another chance to make a playoff run in Dallas. Team chemistry. The Dallas Mavericks in general have been staying away from the headlines lately because, by all accounts, their team chemistry is pretty healthy. In the offseason, the team traded Seth Curry to Philadelphia in exchange for guard Josh Richardson. Richardson is expected to make a great fit for an already well-rounded Mavericks team, with Luka as the primary offensive weapon. The team is also not one for in-house conflicts or drama. On December 27th, the Mavericks faced off against the Los Angeles Clippers at the Staples Center for what was to become a truly historic night. The Clippers once again stole the spotlight from the Mavericks by executing one of the worst team performances in NBA history. At halftime, the score was 77-27, an NBA record. Despite an all-star lineup fronted by Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, the Los Angeles Clippers continue to shock the NBA world with their shortcomings. Something about the chemistry in LA just doesn't seem to be coming together yet, and this has all the sports media preoccupied. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the floor, Luka Doncic had a relatively quiet, average night away from the scrutiny of the basketball world. He scored 24 points and helped lead his team to a very, very easy victory without calling much attention to himself. Doncic and the Mavericks seem to be all about just playing the game and getting it done. And this is another reason why we don't hear much about them lately. The team's record. Another reason we aren't hearing much about Luka Doncic these days is probably because his team isn't very high in the Western Conference. The Mavericks are currently in 11th place, just behind the Minnesota Timberwolves, and just above the infamously underperforming Golden State Warriors. The basketball world is more focused on teams like the Phoenix Suns, who traded for Chris Paul in the offseason and are now looking like arguably the best team in the West. After the Mavericks' win over the Miami Heat on New Year's Day, coach Rick Carlisle had this to say to reporters: "We haven't done we really haven't. We've shown up in 2 out of 5 games." Carlisle has been more forgiving when talking about his star player Luka Doncic, however, saying, quote, "Luka just plays. He's very smart, and he is constantly analyzing and adjusting his game to the surroundings," end quote. It sounds like the Mavericks are simply struggling to get their footing in the Western Conference so far this season. Both the coaching staff and players seem more occupied with practicing, executing, and improving than they do with courting controversy and widespread media attention. This also explains why you don't hear as much about Luka Doncic or the Mavericks, as you might expect these days, but fans of the franchise would warn you, beware of the sleeping giant. If Dallas can lock things in and make the most of their roster's potential, the rest of the league has a true, formidable foe in their near future. His location. Dallas is the 9th largest city in the U.S. and only the 3rd largest city in the state of Texas. There are 2 other major NBA franchises just a few hours away from the Dallas Mavericks' home turf: Greg Popovich and the Spurs in San Antonio, and James Harden and the Rockets in Houston. Both of these cities have much larger populations and much larger fan bases, meaning the Dallas Mavericks are arguably the least popular NBA team in their own home state, let alone the greater NBA. For a young rising star, it can make a big difference where you choose to play and what fan base you choose to play for. That being said, Luka is still one of the more popular players in the NBA today. Bleacher Report ranked him as the league's 22nd best player back in 2019. In 2020, he was selected to play in the All-Star game in Chicago, Illinois, making him the youngest European NBA All-Star in history. Doncic also has over 5 million followers on Instagram, where he posts regularly about his training and whereabouts for an active and engaged audience. Would Doncic have more fans and get more attention from the media if he played in a different city? The answer is probably yes. However, Luka looks very much at home playing in Dallas and shows no intention of looking to play anywhere else for the time being as things continue to build and come together. Not to mention, it would be a disaster for the Mavericks franchise if Luka were to somehow leave. Luka Doncic is a once-in-a-generation NBA superstar. Critics, journalists, players, veterans, and Hall of Famers alike have marveled at his skill, his consistency, his work ethic, and just how young and full of potential he still is. There's no question we will be hearing from Luka again. His future in the NBA is about as bright as any player who has ever come into the league. But for now, Luka and the Mavericks are taking their time, working to piece everything together, and remaining largely out of the spotlight. In time, we'll see whether Luka Doncic has what it takes to bring an NBA championship to Dallas. And one day, we may all forget what it was like not to hear about Luka Doncic. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, please make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And if you have any theories about why we aren't hearing about Luka Doncic today, tell us in the comments. We'll see you next time.